The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased and honored to have two members of the House of Delegates, Delegate Lee Ware, Chair of the Finance Committee. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Woody. It's good to be back with you.
Great. And House Majority Leader Kirk Cox. Good to see you.
Woody, it's always good to be with you and my good friend Lee Ware, so we look forward to this interview.
Great. We were talking earlier, it's a lickety-split session, so to speak, 45 days, and I know you've hit the ground running. One of the more important issues, obviously, is the economy.
And it's affected our budget. You know, as I explained to people, generally coming out of recession, Virginia tracks way ahead of other states in the nation, and that has not been so. And we've discussed this a little bit ahead of time. Sequestration and probably the military is one of the biggest factors. And a lot of people go, well, unemployment really hasn't ticked up a whole lot. But the problem is that some of those jobs have been replaced, especially in Northern Virginia, but the pay is literally two-thirds down. And so you get an independent contracting job that might average $135,000. Now they're averaging in the $50,000, $45,000 range. So that's really affected our revenues. We're about $2.4 billion down.
And so what are you doing in terms of prioritizing things within the budget as a result of those kinds of figures?
We did something very smart. We were in special session, so we came in September and took care of a lot of the problem. And frankly, it was some pain sharing. One of the things we were proud of is K-12 was left off of any of the cuts.
So it's going to be held harmless.
Yes, and that will continue. That's a commitment on all of us in the General Assembly, so you will see that in the budget. It'll be held harmless. We tried to also mitigate the cuts to higher education. They did take some cuts, but they were minimized. Local government got some cuts, state agencies between 5 and 7%. But I think we did a really good job of really spreading the pain some. One of the things we really wanted to make sure we did is make sure that we're structurally sound for the future. So I think we've done some very smart things. We kept our obligation to fund VRS, the Virginia Retirement System. Unfunded liability was up to about $19 billion several years ago, and that's really dependent. Teachers, state employees, your constitutional officers. So very happy with what we've done that to pay back that system. The good news is, with gas prices down and some other things you've seen, our revenues are finally ticking up a little bit. We've had some good months, and so it looks like that we've bottomed out and are coming up some. We're still cautious, but we feel like we're coming up some.
And Delegate Ware, as Chairman of the Finance Committee, you're wrestling with these issues as well.
We surely are, Woody, and it affects both sides of the ledger, as Kirk said. One of the things that I was involved in this year was traveling with the other chairs of the money committees and the governor to New York to revisit our bond rating with the agencies in New York, and talking with Secretary Brown just the other day, and the indications are very positive that we'll be able to sustain that rating, maintaining Virginia's external reading by those who look at our financials as being solid and structurally balanced, which is critically important as we go through and weather this recession.
Absolutely. And even though interest rates are low, it's very important to maintain that AAA bond rating and to balance the budget, unlike our friends in Washington.
Absolutely. It means millions of dollars when you're talking about bonded debt, and it's very important for Virginia.
Talk to us a little bit more about higher education. I know you have some legislation in dealing specifically with it.
Well, our goal over the last few years is obviously, we call it affordability and access for students. So one of the things we've really encouraged the last few years is some of our flagship institutions, whether it be UVA, Tech, I'll leave one of them out, JMU, et cetera. We really want them to increase their in-state enrollment because there's such demand. And so that's one thing they've done. We've tried to reward that by funding additional enrollment. So that's been a big step forward. Retention's a big issue, Woody. A lot of times, you know, we think of just adding freshmen, but one of the things we really want to do is get graduation rates up. We want to get retention up. And so those are some important things. So if you look in the budget, we've tried to fund some incentives to to have certain schools who maybe don't have as high of graduation rates to really get their retention up. So you can do that a lot of ways. As far as them taking more transfer students, they're older, they're more mature. I have a bill that deals with financial aid that rewards you. You get more financial aid for every year you go up the ladder. Freshmen get less than sophomores, sophomores less than juniors. So that senior, who a lot of times is not thought of very often, gets more financial aid than that freshman. So rewarding for staying in. My big bill is my athletic fee bill. JLARC, our sort of watchdog agency, looked at the non-academic side. And growth has really gone up a lot on the non-academic side. Athletics right now is about 12% of the total cost of a college experience. I'm a big sports person. I've laughed. Lee and I both taught school. I coach basketball and baseball. I have a son who's going to play Division II volleyball. So I think that is part of the experience. I think it's become too much part of the experience. Everyone's going to be the next Ohio State. Everyone's going to win the national championship.
Right.
And the truth be told, there are only about 5 institutions across the United States that make money off of sports. So a lot of that's been put on the back of students. We have student fees as high as $1,700, $1,800 just for athletics in some of our universities. So I'm trying to bend the cost curve a little bit, trying to make some of the schools stretch and find more of their revenue through ticket sales and through alumni, and take some of the burden off of students. And so that's probably one of my big pieces of legislation.
Over the past few years, there's been some discussion of tax preferences. I know that's still being examined, but you also have an income tax matter that you are pursuing this session. Can you talk to us about that particular piece of legislation and in general the discussions that are going on around tax preferences?
Certainly. There has been an ongoing legislative study committee that's looked at tax preferences and has begun to methodically work its way through those that have accumulated through the years. Do they really work today as they should have in current terms compared to where they started? When we looked at them, both our overall financials, does it make sense? And is it achieving the public policy goal that was intended when it was put in place? One of the bills that I have this year is one that deals more specifically with the use of debit cards. As a cost-saving measure, I put in the budgeteers a couple of years ago put in a requirement that to those who didn't have a savings account, a checking account to which their refund could go, that they would be obliged to receive a debit card. There was a savings there on the order of $250,000 is what the estimates are to the Commonwealth. And in these tight times, we're looking for every place under the couch cushions where we can find it. But I began hearing from a number of constituents who said, you know, there are fees associated with this if you don't do it in just the right way. You have older people who are not used to debit cards, and young people, for that matter, who really didn't realize what they had received. And so what I've done is put a bill in, and I think it ultimately, I have confidence it will be successful, is a bill that would allow us once again to receive checks, direct income tax refund as a in check form, which many more people are familiar with. So that's going to go, I hope, forward as we proceed. The Senate has dealt with a similar bill. On the tax credit front, probably the largest single piece this year, again, that's structurally changing the tax code, has to do with the land preservation tax credit. And I have a measure. I've been a champion and a big supporter of these tax credits because I think they do a tremendous job in saving family farms in high growth areas, in protecting historic battlefield sites and others. The question is, can we afford to do what we may have done in the past when times were a little, the economics were a little more robust? And we've come, I think, over time to a consensus this year that we need to dial back, not eliminate, and in fact not even have, as some people would suggest, but to dial back that tax credit so that we probably are more targeted and are also, you know, reckoning with our budgetary challenges, as Doug at Cox mentioned.
Now that's a long-term project, not only on land preservation tax credits, but all the others. because there's quite a bit of money wrapped up in those investments, because they're considered investments in order to encourage businesses to continue to come here and also to stay here. But it's a tough job balancing all of that within the tax code, I take it.
What do you put your finger on it? You're balancing goods. One thing may be very good in the circumstances of 1995. Something may be better. The balance may shift for 2015. And so that's what we're in the context of looking at and trying to look at it responsibly. JLARC, that Kirk sits on, has reviewed some of those, and as I said, there is an ongoing joint subcommittee studying tax preferences.
Back to the federal government and sequestration. The other thing that's been going on over the last 10 years now is the Base Realignment Commission. You and I had talked a little bit about Fort Lee and how important it is, and it's subject to that review now. Talk to us about the consequences if that base is closed.
It's a good point. I think the bigger danger probably right now for Fort Lee, because so many things were sort of realigned under Fort Lee, but it's basically the force reduction. And we're looking at maybe going from a force all the way down to around 420,000 from a high of well north of 500,000. So that would probably, if that happens, that'd probably have a direct effect of about 3,500 soldiers at Fort Lee that wouldn't be there, and of course the ripple effect through the economy. Right. So there was recently testimony done at Fort Lee, all the local mayors, Rosalind Dance, who's in the Senate now, myself. We're talking about the economic impact, some of the things, why we're such a veteran-friendly state and why Fort Lee is so crucial. It was interesting, we had Randy Forbes down yesterday and talking about some of our Veterans Care Centers. But, he mentioned, which I think a lot of us forget, that, obviously the world is almost a more dangerous place than we've seen in years and years and years. And during a recent briefing that he had, there were basically 10 hotspots they were talking about that were, crucial areas we're going to have to deal with immediately. So the thought of, drawing down your Army, your Navy too far, I think, is dangerous for the country. So certainly, that is something we've been united behind. The community in the Tri-Cities area, et cetera, and in Chesterfield has really always been very proactive as far as Fort Lee goes. And so I think if we looked at all the great things Fort Lee has done, it's certainly an area that we want to try to address.
And of course, we have to try to diversify our economy as much as we can, given the dependence we have on the federal government.
And I think this is, again, one place where both the legislature and the governor have been working on this, and I think the governor's worked very hard to try and bring in, as his predecessor did, bring in new economic development that can provide jobs for Virginians and to re-diversify. As Kirk said, giving a little bit of history on that, historically we have come out of recessions quicker because we have been a very diverse economy. We have come to rely, I think, somewhat unconsciously on the federal government and defense significantly, and I think it's important for us to extend the bandwidth, if you will, of our economic state.
And of course that means taking care of our veterans when they return or retire, encouraging them to become entrepreneurs. What is the Commonwealth doing in that regard?
Well, there's probably no person who can give you more chapter and verse on that than Kirk. If I could a little bit hitchhike on the general thought of those in uniform, one area, and among others, that has really taken some lumps with our diminished general fund resources, or at least at best sort of steady state general fund, is public safety. And in the area that I represent, we've had a prison close. There are other places that a couple have been delayed. And so that's a concern. There are jobs lost. And I've also heard, and I'm deeply concerned about the state police, among other state employees, and all state employees have had to bear their share of level funding. But I'm concerned, and I've heard a lot of positive indications that we'll be able to move incrementally to help with state employees and state police, which I think is a crying need for us right now.
Great. Kirk, turning to more discussion about our veterans, I think there's a facility up in Northern Virginia and one in the Hampton Roads area that's part of the budget discussion this year.
Yeah, Woody, currently we have 2 state, a lot of people get these mixed up with like a McGuire's. We have 2 state Veterans Care Centers, one in the Salem Roanoke area and one right here in Richmond on the site of McGuire, but it's a different facility called Sitter Barfoot after 2 Congressional Medal of Honor winners. And they are state-of-the-art facilities. They generally are around 240 beds, not always. And they have specialized Alzheimer's units, skilled nursing care, et cetera. And you've heard a lot of the criticism of the VA. There's been almost no criticism of the state care centers. I mean, go through one. I went through Sitter Barfoot recently. They get tremendous care. We have 2. Maine has 6. Pretty amazing considering the amount of veterans in both states. Right. We have 1 care center for every 400,000 veterans. Maine has 1 for every 2,000 veterans.
Wow.
So we have 2 priorities. One in Hampton Roads, where there's such a concentration of veterans, and one in Northern Virginia. We've been on a waiting list since 2005 for Hampton Roads, 2009 for Northern Virginia. So 35% state construction share, 65% federal construction share. We donate the land. Virginia Beach has stepped up. City Council has already donated 15 to 25 acres in Virginia Beach. Prince William has donated the land in Northern Virginia. So we've really done our part. One of the reasons we had Congressman Forbes and Congressman Rob Whitman down yesterday was to commit congressional support. The Speaker and I have met with Governor McAuliffe. He's 100% behind it. We're on a waiting list as far as the federal government goes. And so we're trying to urge them as Virginia really needs these care centers. Sometimes, you know, we laugh. The federal government does things in an interesting fashion. And one of the things we discovered was that we only have in Virginia the 2 Veterans Care Centers. But since we've been on the list for several years, they actually count those proposed Veterans Care Centers against us as far as how many beds we have. And I was doing some research, and they basically say, you have over 1,000 beds. I go, no, we don't. We only have 400 and something. They go, oh, the 2 are on the list, so they count. It puts us in a different category of less need.
I see.
And so this is the type of thing you have to do. I reduced both Veterans Care Centers proposed by 10 beds to get them under the 1,000 to throw us in a different priority list. But just things like that just puzzle the public.
Right.
And why would you do it that way? But those are the types of things you have to sort of work through when you're doing these types of bills.
What kind of additional services would these centers provide veterans?
It's a great point. They are, for lack of a better term, they're very, very high-end veterans' homes. So they would basically be for people, obviously, that would be in a nursing home type situation, generally. But I think 2 of the things they really have that are state-of-the-art is they have tremendous Alzheimer's units. Both have about 60 bed in those Alzheimer's units. They have the Wonder Garden for veterans and really good skilled nursing care. There is some rehab component to it, but they're mainly for retired veterans. The great thing for this area, because everybody says, well, that's Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, but remember, you have to, if you want to get in a Veterans Care Center, you have to go to one of the 2. So it takes a lot of slots from our local residents. And so if we could get 2 where they're really needed, I think that would really help out.
In a similar vein, if you know, a few years ago, I believe the Commonwealth entered into an agreement with the Department of Justice about our training centers. I believe Southside is now closed. Those are institutions that house adult children of elderly parents now who've been there for some time, but the rationale was to get them closer to home. How's that going? I know it does have an impact on the budget, the economy in terms of people losing their jobs and things of that nature.
Kirk, I think I'm going to have to turn to you on that one.
No, sure. We deal with a little bit more than the Budget Committee and Finance does.
He's the money man.
Yeah, he's the man alive.
We provide the purse and
there you go. There you go.
Make use of it.
But you're right, Woody. We've closed the one locally, and that transition went very well. I mean, obviously, the theory today, and a lot of states don't have any training centers whatsoever. So the theory today with advanced medicine, et cetera, that a lot of folks that are in training centers can move seamlessly into the community. That can be, you need a lot of day support. You need a lot of other types of support for them. And I think that's been fairly successful. And so you have a closure schedule. I think the next one is Northern Virginia. That's obviously been somewhat controversial with some of the parents up there, et cetera. Right. And then you have Central Virginia, Southwest Virginia, but they're all on a schedule to close. The costs are pretty high. The original costs, like always with original costs, have gone up fairly dramatically. We're still going to have issues to deal with, though, even with the closing of the centers. We still have a waiting list of about 9,000 people that are waiting to get services who are currently in the community. and these are what we call ID and DD waiver services.
Right,
So
right.
if you get an ID or a DD waiver, that will give you, supportive support coming into the home, et cetera. This allows a parent who's aging to keep that loved one in the home. So we're working through those issues. One of the things we're trying to get a hold of is how can we tailor that waiver to your needs? We've had these very general waivers, so if you're very severe, you basically almost get the same services if you're less severe. So how can we tailor the waivers to fit the person and save a little bit of money there, and then you get the services you really need? So a lot of discussion upstairs about that, talking about big money, maybe the $400, $500, $600 million range. So
Wow.
a lot of discussion on that.
Back to finance and schools, I'd like to take advantage of your expertise, talk about the importance of continuing to finance, and I believe it's the sales tax that finances our community colleges.
It does. That's a significant factor for us and for schools generally. Again, as Kirk said, one of the really bright spots is that we've been able to maintain K-12 spending when many other areas of the budget have had to take a hit. And I think that's very important. As I talk to folks, my colleagues as teachers and other education administrators and parents who are concerned about class size, about all the elements that go to making up a good public schooling and providing those for our kids. One of the things that we've done lately, as you know, Woody, is make some steps on revising the standards of learning.
Yes.
For example, just a little over 1/4 of the tests that had been required for elementary students have been combined or reduced, and I think that's moving in the right direction. I think there's probably some other modest steps we can take to reduce the amount of time testing without diminishing genuine accountability. And I think it's finding that balance that we need to do going forward. I'm proud to be part of the House, which has really taken the lead on that, and I think we need to continue.
I guess a couple of the other issues that were around last year, which appear to have disappeared, one as a result of a court decision, the other because it was just so controversial, was the grading A to F, and also the ability of the state to take over a failing school district. Are you hearing anything about those issues, or are they basically dead for now?
It's interesting, Woody. We hear about those issues, and I think anybody who's involved in education has to be concerned about children who are not being as well served as they ought to be. Kirk and I are very fortunate in the districts we represent. By and large, the schools there have tremendous reputations that have been earned over the course of time. But I served for a term on the State Board of Education, and that was something we grappled with back then. What do we do with schools that have been consistently underperforming and, to all appearances, are not serving their students in the way they need to be served in these growing competitive times where they're going to be competing with kids not only from Virginia, not only from our states, but around the world. And how you resolve that, how you achieve that kind of reform has been a discussion here and in other states. And I don't think there's any single easy way to do it. We did have that conversation last year, and it seems to me that it does not seem to have moved forward in that fashion, and I think we've got to continue to, because we've got kids right now who are entering first grade who will, I hate to say it, will be underserved in many instances, and we see the results of that.
Absolutely. And third grade reading levels are critical. And matter of fact, unfortunately, they are a negative predictor for kids who can't read at third grade level.
No, it's a great point. On OEI, as you know, that was ruled unconstitutional. So currently what a superintendent, the power they have basically is they sit down with the school board and sit down with the superintendent. And I think Steve Staples, who's the current superintendent, is doing a good job. I taught with him years ago. But right now all they can do is basically negotiate. So you get a memorandum of understanding that these are things we're going to do. And that's great, but what happens if that school system is constantly failed, doesn't meet that memorandum? The superintendent and the board really don't have a lot of power. So I do think we need to think about what are we going to do. Maybe it's not OEI. But what are we going to do to get them a little bit more, frankly, sometimes you want to use the carrot, but you want to use the stick a little bit too. So we probably got to find some interim measure. A through F, as Leah said, I mean, it's not gone. It was sort of put off for 2 years. Right. I think we're looking at, do we need to put some more subtlety in it? It was basically mainly SOL scores, how you were judged. maybe we can put more growth measures in and give schools credit for growing, but maybe not hitting these targets that might have been a little unrealistic for them. So we're looking at both of those.
Back to our community colleges, again, it's a way for our veterans when they return to get started and become entrepreneurs. What about, is there a program that allows for work experience credits?
That's a great question. There is, but a lot more needs to be done there. That we give, for example, and this is sort of community college and sort of not, but troops to trucks. One of the things we've really pushed, for example, is, let's get that military member his CDL, his commercial driver's license, while he's still in the military. When he comes out, he's a lot more marketable. You can do that with medics to nursing. You can do that through a whole lot of things. Talwater Community College has done some interesting work as far as that kind of, credentialing. But we need to do more with that. I mean, we need to give military folks credit for that experience they have and not make them jump through hoops that are unnecessary. And so, credentialing, as you know, Woody, is a big thing now. A lot of industries, that's what they're requiring, certain types of stackable credentials. And we're really working on that. So that's got to be an area we do better in. I'm a big believer in the liberal arts. I mean, and I've never liked the European models. I think they're terrible. But I think also we got to put a more emphasis on CTE and credentialing, et cetera. So getting that balance, as Lee almost says, with standards is the same thing in that area.
And of course, all of our youngsters don't need or want to go to college, but they can certainly take advantage of our community college system. If they want to go, there's the 2+2 program, for example.
And the community colleges it's extraordinary when you think about the flexibility that they furnish to students, both in the range of courses they make available, in the work that they do with our employers to connect with the real needs in business for employment, the affordability, and the sheer range of places where they are across the Commonwealth. Our community colleges are a gem that does a lot. We have kids come in every year, typically with their professors and folks from the community colleges, and the stories they tell are terrific about people who decided, I need to go back and get some training, and that community colleges are a wonderful way to do that.
Less than a minute left. I'll give you the last word on ethics reform.
Well, obviously it's a very big issue. Obviously you want the public to have trust in your public officials. It's a high honor that we take very seriously. So I think you'll see a bill emerge this year that will probably put a cap on tangible and intangible gifts about $100. Last year it was $250 just for tangible. And I think that's important. I think we need to get that down. I think I saw some recent newspaper reports. You see gift giving way down, which is good. I mean, we need to really try to limit those things. The one thing we don't want to do, though, is unintentionally put tripwires in where people are breaking the law who are part-time legislators who didn't meaningfully do that.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Delegate Kirk Cox, the House Majority Leader, Delegate Lee Ware, Chair of the Finance Committee. Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching Cable Report, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.